Hey guys, so one of the biggest reasons that couples fight about money is not because of the money itself. It's usually because of what money represents. It's things like security, freedom, power, even love. So if you and your partner want to get on the same page about money, or you just find yourself avoiding conversations about money because they bring up unwanted feelings, well, this video is going to be for you. What I'm going to do in today's video is I'm going to break down how I talk about money with the couples that I see in couples therapy, things that you should consider if this is something that you want to bring up with your partner, and common pitfalls that people get into when they try to have these conversations and it doesn't go well. If you're new to my channel, my name is Wes. I am a couples therapist, and this channel is devoted to helping you improve your relationships. Let's dive into how to have money conversations to make your relationship stronger. Before you and your partner create a financial plan together, the biggest thing to figure out is how you both feel about money. What kind of role does money take up for each of you in the relationship? Now, this is a really important step. I don't want you to skip this step because money carries a lot of emotional weight for all of us. It can mean different things to each person, and it's really important to figure out what money means for you and what it could be tied to, both in your past and how that could be showing up in your current relationship. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take out a pen and pad or open up your favorite notes app on your phone, and I want you to write down a few of these questions to go over with your partner. Okay. Question 1, what did money look like in your family growing up? Was it a source of stress or something that you didn't even think about, or somewhere in between? Number 2, what does money mean to you now? Does it mean security, stability, freedom? Does it give you a sense of self-worth or importance? These are some things that I want you to consider. Number 3 is, are you more of a saver or more of a spender? And I want you to think about, why are you a spender or a saver too? Are you a saver because you really value that sense of security and well-being that goes with having a big savings fund? Or are you more of a spender because you really enjoy living life to the fullest and you're more about living in the present? Or maybe again, it's somewhere in between. Write down which one you feel like you are, which way you lean, and why you think that might be. And next, what do you feel when you think about money? Do you feel a sense of guilt? Do you feel anxiety? Do you not want to think about money because of the feelings that it brings up for you? Or do you feel secure, safe, excited? Write down those feelings too. Okay, now let me know down in the comments below. Do you and your partner have the same things on your list, or are they pretty different? I want to hear down in the comments below one thing that you wrote down from your list and one thing that your partner wrote down from their list. I've worked with a couple where they both grew up in really wealthy households, and yet they both had a lot of anxiety about money. And I've also worked with a couple where there were big differences in money growing up. One person grew up in a very wealthy household where his family was always talking about money, maybe to their detriment, because now he feels a big pressure to always be secure, always be making a lot of money. And if he doesn't, then he feels a little bit unstable in life. Whereas his partner didn't grow up in a household that was focused that way. They made okay money, but they weren't as focused on it. And because of that, she feels anxious because she doesn't have financial literacy or education, and also feels a real sense of comparison between herself and her partner who makes more. However, in both cases, we were able to have productive conversations about money by bringing up these underlying feelings and getting them out into the open, and setting clear goals for each of these couples to talk about money in a more open and transparent way. By getting to those underlying feelings and understanding where they're coming from, you can put everything out on the table and develop a path forward with your partner instead of letting those anxieties or uncertainties or hidden values take over and influence your behavior in a way that makes everybody in the relationship uncomfortable. Unless you understand where your partner's coming from, you can't get to that better place. So now let's talk about each person's expectations around money. Ask yourself and your partner this question. Do you already have financial goals, or are you figuring it out as you go? Number 2, do you prefer strict budgeting, or do you prefer having more flexibility in how you manage your money? You don't want to be looking at it all the time. And number 3, what do each of you feel that financial security really looks like for you as a couple? This might look very different for each person, but again, by getting this out on the paper, we can begin to find a middle ground, something that looks good for both of you. And here's a big one. What would feel fair for each of you related to spending, big expenses, in saving every month. I've seen couples where one person tracks every single dollar they spend every single month down to the cents, and they feel really comfortable being super strict and having an exact idea of where all their money is at any one given time. While for their partner, that brings up a lot of anxiety because they want to be in a relationship where they don't have to worry about money all the time. They just want to set a goal, spend as much as they need to for that month, and then not worry about it, not think about it again. The key here isn't to force one another into the other person's approach. The goal is to find a middle ground where you both can meet. Okay, now we're going to talk about our values around money. So this is where things get interesting. Your spending habits usually reflect your hidden values around money, and there may be misalignment. So it's good to identify what those values are so that we can then align them with our financial goals too. Let me give you an example of a couple that I worked with recently. In this couple, the husband and wife had very different views on tipping. For the wife, she believed in tipping generously all the time. Worked in food service before, and so when she tipped, it was a sign of appreciation and being overly generous, 20% minimum every single time. For the husband, though, he didn't like to give big, audacious tips. He might do 10%, 15%, but he wouldn't go over that typically. He also valued generosity, but it was more about doing donations to nonprofits or initiatives that he found to be really impactful. But his wife saw his lower tips as him not being generous. He saw her big tips as being overly generous, over the top, something that he wasn't comfortable with. However, when they talked about their values and they aligned on the idea that they both really valued generosity, they were able to come to a middle ground and recognize that it was important for each of them to be generous. And so they could align on how much they wanted to spend on things like tips, meeting in the middle ground and finding more moderate but specifically meaningful ways to donate to things that they really cared about. So you still have your pen and paper handy? Well, here's the questions that I want you to write down this time. Where do you naturally want to spend more money? What financial habits feel ethical or important to you? And when you spend or save, how do you want those to reflect your financial values? Some common financial values to consider here would be things like being generous, feeling secure, or the value of friendship, covering a friend's meal because you know that it's important to help maintain your friendship and build that sense of trust with you and the other person. So reflect on these values around the ways that you spend money and save money, and write down a few that you think would be really important to you. I'll also link my core values video down below too, so that you can go through that and come up with some core values that are important to you. So take some time to think through that and think about, do I want my spending to align with these values in a certain way? And write that down and then share that with your partner. Okay. The next line of questioning is around differences in income. Most couples don't make the same amount of money. So the question is, how do you want to handle that with your partner? Think about the following questions. Should income differences affect who pays for what? And in what situations one person pays or the other doesn't? Do you expect your partner to earn a certain amount? Is it not okay if they don't earn that amount? Or if they want to take time off from work? What if one of you wants to stop working? Maybe if you have kids, or if you just want to take a break from your career for a little while. Would you want the other person to support you? Are you okay with your partner doing that for a certain amount of time? How much time feels like too much? Now, keep in mind that these questions can be asked again in the future when these things come up. But I think it's helpful to have a basic idea of them now, so that if something comes up in the future, all of a sudden you find out that you're going to have a child, or one person loses their job, gets laid off, something like that. You have a plan and you know what your partner might expect of you when that time comes. By getting that out into the open around one person's desire to shift their career, you're able to better meet together to support each other when that time comes. Okay, now that we've done some reflection, let's talk about how to move forward together around the topic of money. The first thing that I want you to think about is transparency and how much is enough. Now, when I mean how much is enough, I don't mean total income. I mean how much transparency is enough for each of you. In couple relationships, I find that it's really helpful to have a degree of transparency into each other's finances. Now, this can bring up a lot of feelings between both partners. Some partners may feel anxious about the other partner seeing their income. But I think if you are committed to being in a trusting long-term relationship with your partner, it's important to have a shared idea of what the other person is earning and what the other person's expenses are to some extent. Here are some things that I recommend to every couple that I work with. 1, both partners should know how much the other person makes, be clear about what your actual income is. Number two, be clear about where your money is going. Is it being transferred into a personal account? Is it to a shared account? Where is that money disappearing to? Three, you should be clear on any big financial goals that you both share. Do you guys want to be saving for a house? Or are you saving up money so that you feel comfortable having a kid when that time comes? It's important to get these goals out in the open so that you can begin working towards them together. Okay, let's talk about shared or separate accounts. This always comes up in my conversation with couples. And you know what? There's no one size fits all. That's the good news. However, here's what I found has worked best for most of the couples that I've worked with. And it's a hybrid approach. So here it is. One, a shared account where some percentage of each person's income goes. And that shared account is used to pay for shared expenses, sometimes with a shared credit card, for example. Those shared expenses could include things like car payments, gas, home costs, or mortgage payments, rent, etc. And you can figure out with your partner what those shared costs are and break down a budget for yourselves around how much money you might need in that account to pay for those expenses, plus a little buffer for other things that might come up. Then, personal accounts, one for each of you, where you can siphon off some extra money, usually a small percentage, 10%, 20%, something like that, for each of you to use for your own personal expenses, maybe buying a nice gift for the other person or just buying something that you want for yourself. And then number three is guidelines for big expenses. So here's the thing. You don't want to be contributing to a shared account. One person makes more money than the other person, and that person, because they make so much more money, feels justified buying all of a sudden out of the blue a huge purchase that then makes the other person feel uncomfortable. For big purchases, you guys want to be on the same page if you're sharing financial goals. So the way to get around this is by having some kind of guidelines for big expenses. What does that look like? Well, that's up to you to determine. What I've worked with other couples to establish is, what does a big purchase really mean? Is big over $100, over $50, over $1,000? Figure out where that limit is for you. Most couples usually fall between like $200 and $500. And anything over that threshold, you need to discuss that purchase with your partner before you make it. The goal here is, again, you're trying to be transparent and we're trying to get ahead of any kind of thing coming up in the future that might upset one person or the other. All right, guys, so we've gone through a lot of details here. So let's talk a little bit about how to keep these conversations healthy, because financial conversations can be one of the most stressful things that come up in couples therapy. So here are my tips. Number one, revisit these conversations regularly. Do it, I would say, at least once a quarter, for sure once a year, but sit down with your partner regularly, talk about finances, and you can reevaluate some of these rules. That's the good news. Not all these things have to be set in stone, and if one of you might be having a career transition or something big coming up that they want to pay for or add to your goals, then that's when you can have those conversations and revisit the expectations that you set with your partner previously. So set a time, put it on the calendar, and revisit these conversations regularly. Number two is watch out for big emotions. I can't stress this enough. If you're feeling anxious or frustrated or even resentment towards your partner, then that's probably brushing up against something from your past or one of these money values that we've talked about that maybe you haven't voiced to your partner just yet. And it's a trigger to you, a sign to you that you need to bring that into the space with your partner and use it as something to talk about. Because if you don't bring it up now, it's only going to get worse. And number three is to keep the conversation focused on dreams. The more you can focus your efforts in the conversation around your hopes, your dreams, the things you want to build with your partner for the future, instead of angers or resentments or blame, you can keep the conversation focused on the shared things that you're both working towards. And that will really help get your partner more involved and keep them on your side as you talk about this really difficult conversation. Focus on what you're building together, not on tearing the other person down. So, guys, money conversations can be tough. I know, but they can also be a source of connection. They don't have to be a time that you are anxious about or something that brings up fear of how your partner is going to react. There is a path forward. And the key is having open, non-judgmental conversations with your partner and laying it all out on the table. So let me know down in the comments below if you have one of these money conversations. Any questions that you have for me, I want to know how it went. If you had the conversation with your partner, please tell me whether it went well or it didn't go well and what came up for you during the process. I'm here to help, and I will see you next time in our next video. If you haven't so far, give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, and share this with somebody who needs it. See you next time.